Anger's okay. Anger is a gift. Anger is good. And needs to be fully expressed. Fully. And I might add, it helps to do it skillfully. It doesn't help to get angry at someone in front of you and start calling them names or punishing them or judging them. Because I don't know how you react, but when somebody is in front of you accusing you of all kinds of things, you kind of tend to close down a little bit and resist and take on a defensive attitude. So the essence of anger is ultimately a message that you have needs that are not being met. And what is it that we all want? We'd like our needs to be met. And the appropriate response and the appropriate avenue to getting your needs met is to compassionately suggest to the one in front of you that there are needs that you have, and that it would be great if they would recognize those needs and joyfully, willingly meet them. You don't really want someone in front of you to meet your needs because they're afraid of being punished, because they're afraid of being guilted or judged in some fashion, because that's a very temporary change. What you really want, even if you don't know it, is to have your needs met willingly, because someone is compassionate for you and your needs. So that's the crux of this process called fully expressing anger. Fully expressing anger does not mean becoming Mount St. Helens. It simply doesn't mean that, because that tends to get in the way. It tends to make people protect themselves from the very presence that you are. And that's not what you're after. What you're after is for people to understand what it is that you're feeling in the moment. Feelings and emotions are simply tools by which your needs are met. If you didn't have the emotion called hunger, you literally would starve to death. Because when you are hungry, your body is sending you a message that you need to get off the couch and go get something to eat. And if you don't hear that, if you don't respond to that emotion called hunger, you literally will starve to death, because you're never motivated to get off the couch and go eat something. And the same is true of anger. It's an emotion that you are feeling, and it needs to be totally addressed. It doesn't need to be raged about, because that's not terribly effective. It just doesn't work. One of the things that we've discovered is that punishment itself doesn't work, because punishment simply builds resentment. You might be able to get a child to do what it is that you threaten them about, but it doesn't work in the long run. What you really are after is seeing what it is that your needs are and expressing it in a way that someone else can get. That is the crux of the issue. And consequently, the first step in this process is coming to understand that what triggers your anger is not the cause of your anger. And there's a huge difference between trigger and cause. Trigger is what begins the process of your thinking. And what causes your anger is your analysis of what has just happened. Your thinking about what has just happened is what causes the anger. It is not the trigger. The trigger doesn't cause your anger. Your thinking causes your anger. That is the problem. And so what the process involves is becoming aware of that distinction. Sometimes we think, I'm angry because that guy is a racist. You know, he just said something terrible. That's not anything but a judgment. It's an analysis of somebody in front of you based on your thinking about what's appropriate and what isn't. What's deeper and more appropriate is a way to convince that other in front of you that you are experiencing a great deal of pain when you listen to those kinds of remarks. And you say something like, I've not had that experience. I'm really sorry that you've had that kind of experience with African American people, or Jewish people, or Muslims, or whatever the thinking is that causes your dispute. And you can say, I have had totally different experiences, and I'm really sad that you've had this kind of negative experience, and I'm wanting you to have the experience that I've had. And if you were able to say at that point, so tell me what you just heard me say. And they're most likely to say something like, well, you told me that I don't have a right to say what I just said. And your response is, no, that's not what I said. That is not what I said. My mission is not to blame you. My mission is not to find you wrong. My mission is to show you how I feel when I hear that kind of thing. My mission is to convince you that there's an opportunity to have a very different experience. So it's very, very difficult to have this conversation with people who have grown up around violence, who have grown up around uncontrolled rage going on. You know, Mount Vesuvius lives in the other side of the house. What did you expect? That's very, very difficult because we are trained and we watch violence going on everywhere. And that's the essence of this problem, is that we are trained to respond violently when we get angry. The whole language is about that. And what we're really after is getting our needs met for the right reason. We want our needs met not because we're threatening punishment, or in the case of a teenager, grounding, or, yeah, that doesn't work. What really is important is to understand the deepest level of needs that are not being met. Your needs. And of course, the other side of this coin is to understand what is motivating the behavior in front of you. To empathize with that person in front of you who has had a negative experience and has incorporated it into their thought system. Because, most people are not crazy. Most people react the way they've been trained and taught. You remember the song from South Pacific? You have to be carefully taught to hate the other. That is not a natural expression. What happens is that we grow up being taught that the other is dangerous. The other is a problem. And, well, good girls don't go out with the other. Did anybody hear that growing up? I bet you did. Yes, indeed. At least if you're as old as I am. So, what we have to do is overcome our training. It is relatively simple, but it's not easy because it happens so much. We are so deeply embedded in the language of violence, in the language of self-defense. Put up your dukes. One of the things that lawyers and politicians engage in all the time is the art of verbal fisticuffs. And so that's just another expression of violence. Demeaning and judging another is just as violent and just as ineffective as taking a stick and rapping them beside the ear. It doesn't work. It's not calculated to get to the issue that is unmet needs. So anger comes from thinking about the wrongness of the other. We are quick to judge, to name call, to say, you're wrong. That's terrible. You can't do that. That's inappropriate. And that is not calculated to get the attention of the other in a way that has them compassionately choose to see things your way. They are going to resist anything that comes out of your mouth after your first judgmental look, after your first judgmental words. You racist. That's not going to work. That is not going to be helpful. What is going to be helpful is to have an experience of the pain that that kind of statement causes other people. No one really gets a lot out of causing pain. They've just been trained to think that that's all there is. The only way to deal with life is to hurt the other before they hurt you. That is particularly true of a whole segment of our population. And particularly it's true in the world of incarceration. If you want to see violence going on, go to a jail or a prison sometime and see how the guards react to the prisoners, how the prisoners react to each other, how the prisoners react to the guards. It's all about power and violence and defense and self-defense. Marshall Rosenberg, in his work with nonviolent communication, has spent a lot of time in prisons and has helped a number of people see differently, to actually have a different experience. In one particular instance, he tells the story of a prisoner who said, I'm just going to kill that son of a gun as soon as I get out of here. I know it's going to send me back, but I've spent the last 2 years just angrier than angry, and I can't stop thinking about what I'm going to do to that son of a gun when I get out. And Marshall Rosenberg said, I bet you I can show you a way that's even sweeter than choking the living daylights out of the guy. And the prisoner says, no way, man, no way. I'm living for the day that I can choke that son of a gun. I'm just living for that. And he said, no, I'll show you a different way, and I guarantee you, you'll find it sweeter. So he had him role play. He had the prisoner take the role of the person who he's angry at. And he engaged in this process. And he said, okay, so it's the first day that I'm going to be you. So Marshall said, it's the first day I'm out of prison and I find you and I grab you and I say, sit down, I want to talk to you. And the prisoner said, that's a good start. And Marshall said, and he went into a description of how he felt and how he had suffered as a result of the actions. And then he said to the prisoner, so tell me what you heard me say. And the prisoner said, well, I can explain it. And Marshall said, no, shut up. Listen, what did you hear me say? And then began this exchange in a way that actually had the prisoner who was acting as the bad guy get that the prisoner who was being acted out by Marshall had suffered greatly as a result of the actions that the guy had taken, and decided, okay, let's figure out how we can do this differently. And about 10 minutes into the process, the prisoner said, stop, okay, I get it. This is really what I need. I don't need to choke the guy to death. I need to be understood. I need to be appreciated for what happened to me and how it felt. And that's exactly what is appropriate and what's most important in this process of fully expressing anger. Fully expressing anger is not punishing somebody. It's not taking a cosmic 2x4 and wrapping them beside the ear. It's not judging them, because those are ineffective means. Fully experiencing anger involves a deep analysis on your part of your needs and the needs of the other. What is it that is causing this kind of behavior? And how do people of differing backgrounds, differing experiences, come to understand one another and willingly participate in the process of compassionately meeting each other's needs? That is the crux of the process. That is what the gift of anger brings. Anger is not bad. It is not wrong. It is not inappropriate. And it is never, ever, ever to be stuffed or repressed, because sooner or later you might become Mount St. Helens. If you stuff it long enough, it'll blow, and then things that are really inappropriate can happen, because you can be dangerous. You can actually hurt someone if you blow your cork inappropriately after years of stuffing anger. So anger is important. It's really just like the little red lights on the dashboard of your car. You know, if the red light saying oil pressure comes on, you're not going to ignore it. You're going to stop and figure out why it's coming on. You're going to turn the engine off and look at the dipstick and see if there's oil in there. And the same is true of the little red light that says water temperature. If it starts, the needle goes up and the red light comes on, you're going to say, whoops, I don't want to cook my engine, so I'm going to stop and turn it off and see what's wrong. And that's the same approach that we take to skillfully and fully express our anger. We analyze, what is it that's going on? And literally, the first step is to shut up. Do not fire off a volley the instant that your anger shows up. You really have to take a moment. Some people literally take a time out. They'll say, okay, time out. I need some time to process what's going on before I respond. And that's okay. You don't have to worry about taking time. You don't have to respond immediately. It's important that you respond in a way that can actually be heard. You simply cannot start the counterattack the instant your anger flares, because that won't work. The instant that you counterattack, somebody's going to put up their shields and take on a defensive stance, and they're not going to hear a word you say. All they're going to say is, there she goes again. And it's just like this. I can't hear you and I don't want to. So it's terribly important that you respond empathically, to hear what's going on in the other and to know what's going on with yourself. The Course in Miracles says that anger is never justified. And that is in fact true, but it's also incomplete. There's no such thing as righteous indignation, but there is the opportunity when anger shows up to recognize it as a little red flashing warning light. To say, okay, my thinking about this is occurring in a way that is not calculated to get my needs met. My thinking is what's happening in this moment is the problem. I need to see this differently. I need a moment to catch my breath. For course students, it's in the moment to invite the Holy Spirit to help you see differently. It's an opportunity to gather yourself before you respond in a way that causes greater conflagration. We learned early on not to try to put out a fire with a cup of gasoline. And the same is true with a conflict. Escalating the conflict never works. What works is to take a moment and to be empathic about your needs and the needs of the other. So, it's a wonderful tool, and it requires practice, because we have no vocabulary of needs. We have a vocabulary that's complete in judgmental terms. We've got a whole list of descriptive terms, including bastard and son of a bitch, and racist, and all of those things that point the finger. So we really have to retrain ourselves, our process of analysis, and our vocabulary so that we actually can respond in a way that gets our needs met compassionately. So, good luck. And thank you, Marshall Rosenberg. Now it's open mic time.